Hi, are we ready to talk about bacteria? Ooh, they've been around for a long time. And protists and fungus, we're going to do a really quick survey. And this is multiple chapters because we're looking at the diversity of life and we got a long way to go. So you want to have your lecture notes out for this whirlwind of I think it's three chapters. Here we go. So we're just sort of skimming. Here we go. I'm going to share the screen. You want to get your slides going here and let's go. Oh my. Oh my. So look at this phylogenetic tree of life. Look at these three domains. We're going to be looking at pretty much all three. So archaea, we won't talk about much, but bacteria, oh my goodness, bacteria have been around for a really long time. We think 1.5 billion years before anyone else showed up. And they're still successful and they're still diverse. This whole purple arm, the domain bacteria, they are prokaryotic. They do not have a nucleus. They don't have to worry about keeping their DNA safe. And that means they can mutate really fast. They have short lifespans. They are successful. So I want you to start thinking about, like, what does it mean to be successful? Because everybody thinks, oh, having a big brain and living a long time is successful. Not necessarily, okay? From a biology perspective, bacteria may be the most successful of all organisms. So something to start toying with. Archaea are another domain. We really won't talk much about them. They're extremophiles. They are also prokaryotic. We're going to kind of leave it there. We don't have time to look at the diversity of archaea. That's like a whole nother class. Okay. But we will also, in this particular slideshow, we'll start talking about eukarya, the domain eukarya. We'll talk about protists, which aren't really their own kingdom. They're kind of like, there's some of them that are like plants, some of them are like animals, some of them are like fungus. So we don't put them in a kingdom, but they're in the domain eukarya. They are eukaryotic. They do have a nucleus. They have organelles. And so we'll talk about how important they are. Usually single-celled. The ciliates over here on the brown area, the ciliates and the flagellates, those are protists, but they're really diverse group. And so we'll be talking about them just for a little bit, and then we'll talk about fungus, which is its own kingdom. They are decomposers. We'll talk about them. Here we go. So why should we include, and not so much archaea, but I mean, they're there, but why should we include bacteria in a discussion of the diversity of life? Why do we care about bacteria? You could say, why do I care about bacteria? But you could also say, why are bacteria important for life or important for this planet? Okay, so lots of different answers here. We will have a little brainstorm, but I just want you to start thinking about, hey, where do bacteria show up in my life? Where do bacteria show up in the lives of others in the planet? Okay, so Earth's first organisms, what were they? Prokaryotic. Okay, they were not. They were single-celled. They were, why does this make sense? They didn't have a nucleus. They didn't have a bunch of organelles. Why does this make sense? Like I said, they were around for a really long time. The two domains, archaea and bacteria. And are they still abundant? We're going to list some of them in class. You might think about maybe your gut flora. You might want to think about all the surfaces. Bacteria are everywhere. They're in the soil. They help break down. One of the things that we talked about in 101 was breaking down nitrogen. So the nitrogen cycle, think about the bacteria. They're essential nitrogen fixing bacteria. So they're everywhere. Very diverse, very successful. That was it for bacteria. We're moving on. So you're looking now at, after we'll do a little brainstorm in class, but now we're looking at protists at the bottom of page 1. And what do we know about protists? They're in a different domain, aren't they? They're more complex, aren't they? Usually single-celled, but they can be multicellular. There's a few examples like slime molds, but usually they're single-cellular, but they have a nucleus. They are also very diverse. They're very important to the world, okay? Algae, very important to the world. Coral reefs, part of that, coral reefs are an animal and a protist living together, an algae living together. Also, the whole ocean, or most of the ocean, 99% of the ocean relies on phytoplankton. So the base of their food chain are these things called phytoplankton. They're little photosynthetic protists. The biomass of these little tiny phytoplankton feed the ocean, feed all, remember we were talking about trophic levels? Feed those consumers, primary consumer, secondary consumer, sharks and tuna and swordfish and mackerel and cod and sharks and whales. Yes, protists feed them. Okay, so are they important? Absolutely, absolutely important. This is just one example. These are called diatoms of the diversity of protists. These are their shapes. If we were to outline their shapes, they have these particular, the diatoms, they have a silica skeleton. Beautiful, gorgeous. Are they important? Yes. We'll talk more. We're going to watch a couple videos in class. If you have time, you can watch them. They're on the next slide. But they're about coral reefs and what's happening with coral reefs, the decline in coral reefs that we've been seeing over the last few decades. They also, are protists important? Yes. Primary productivity in the ocean, very important. They're the bottom of the food chain. Our gut microbiome. So we talked a little bit about this in 101, but all of our membranes, including our gut, including our small intestines, have a huge number of protists that are part of our microbiome. They help us break down food, get vitamins. So are protists important? Yes, they are, even for everyday life. And so it'd be great if you could watch that last video, and then we'll watch the other two in class if we have time. What's happening with bleaching, plastic and coral reefs? We'll definitely watch the second video, the bleaching. So if you have time, watch the others. If you're interested in protists and algae, one potential project idea is that we're really learning, and we need more scientists to continue to learn. We need more green scientists to continue to learn about algae and its potential use as biofuels. So using algae as biofuels is much better for the planet than fossil fuel burning and producing more carbon dioxide above the ground, burning it and producing it above the ground in the atmosphere. We are looking for alternates. So we need some new scientists out there looking at algae. Let me know if you're interested in that. We're moving on to fungus. So you can see this is a survey of chapters here. So we're moving on to fungus, bottom of page 2. What do we know about them? Remember, they're eukaryotes. They're in their own kingdom. And they're in their own kingdom. Fungus is its own kingdom. There are several phyla. We won't worry about the different phyla, but question, do you know, are they primary producers, consumers, or decomposers? Kind of a trick question. What do you think? We'll be on the next slide. How do they eat? Okay, so I'm going to tell you how they eat, and then you tell me what they are, okay? So you and I, if I'm going to eat something or ingest something, I'm going to take it into my mouth, the whole food or the whole item, take it into my mouth, and it will travel into my stomach. That's not the case for fungus. So what they do is they spit out all of the enzymes. So you and I have the enzymes in our mouth and our stomach and our small intestines that break down the food, that digest the food, right? Not the case with fungus. Fungus spit out the enzymes onto their food source. They don't need a mouth. They spit it out. It breaks down, it digests the wood or whatever they're growing on, okay, or whatever they're growing in, breaks it down, and then they absorb it. So they're called absorbative decomposers. Isn't that cool? So really important part of our world system is decomposers, breaking down debris, breaking down feces, breaking down dead organisms, breaking down, fixing nitrogen. So taking nitrogen from, we saw this in 101, taking nitrogen from the atmosphere and putting it into the soil so that plants can use it. Super important. Are they diverse? Absolutely. Do we have time to look at all of the different kinds, all the different phyla? No, but you might know about them already a little bit. You might have eaten them before. Yeah, you're usually eating the fruiting body. The mushrooms are the tops. They're the fruiting bodies. So what you see above ground, generally speaking, is just the fruiting part, just the reproductive part of that organism. So what you're seeing right here in this slide, this is called a fairy ring. And it looks like, oh, those are all different organisms, right? Turns out, no, that's one organism. So this is called a fairy ring. That's one organism, and the organism is down below. They look like strings. So the organism is in the shape of strings. We'll see it in lab. They're called mycelium or mycelium, and they look like strings. That's the actual fungus, and then they'll send up these reproductive structures. Okay, the mushroom up on top. So that's one organism. We think the largest organism on the planet is a mushroom, is a fungus. That fungus is under the ground growing, right? And it's in Eastern Oregon, miles big, miles big. So how old is it? We don't know. So old that it might be the oldest organism as well. So that we're not going to talk that much about the anatomy of fungus. So the question is, what are they like cellularly? You know, they are eukaryotes. They have a nucleus. They also have an interesting chitin skeleton. I don't think we're going to go much beyond that at this point. I'd like you to kind of know that they're in strings. They kind of have that mycelium shape, and I'll show you that in lab. Are they useful? Are mushrooms useful? Are fungus useful? Absolutely, they're useful. Some of the ways: yeast. We use yeast in our cooking. We rise bread with yeast. We also make beer, we make wine. Yeast is incredibly important for us. What about how we eat mushrooms? So those are the fruiting bodies, we eat them. Mycorrhizae. So there are fungus associated with almost every plant, tree out there on the land. These little mycorrhizae, they are little fungus, live in the root tips, live in the roots of the plants and help the plant. They provide nutrients for the plant. They do their little absorbative break down nutrients in this, or break down organisms, break down debris in the soil, provide nutrients for the plants, okay? And what do the plants do? The plants provide a nice house, a nice living space for that mycorrhizae, for that fungus. So there's a mutualism going on with the plants and with the fungus. And we're going to have a discussion question in class about who invaded land first, fungus or plants. And so one of our pieces of evidence for plants invading the earth but having trouble without fungus is why? Because they usually need mycorrhizae. So they probably had some trouble getting enough nutrients in the soil without the fungus. So it probably happened somewhere similarly. We'll talk about it and we'll look at this little evolution connection. So fungus. And I think that's it. That was our whirlwind discussion of those 3 chapters as we start to look at the diversity of life. Have a great day.